Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales Ultimate Edition. And this is kind of a doubly review because this includes Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered. So, as you'll see, I'm kind of doubling up. I did a review of the PlayStation 5 and doing this one for the PlayStation 5 game that I got to kind of test it out. So, I had not played Marvel's Spider-Man on the PlayStation 4, so I saw this. It was on sale to have pretty much two games in one, and I'm like, yeah, alright. And I looked in, and Miles Morales, while a good game, falls more along the lines of kind of Saints Row the 4th, where the 4th one was pretty much going to be DLC for the third game, and then they kind of lengthened it out to be more of its own kind of full-fledged game. Now, this doesn't really screw over Miles Morales, but you kind of definitely get that feeling of, okay, we've got this giant pack that's got the original game upgraded for PlayStation 5. It's all DLCs, and then this one. But I enjoyed both of them. It does fall into certain kind of repetitive, kind of open world kind of things that any kind of game falls into, because they're like, just let them do this kind of stuff. And I'm like, it would have been better if it was kind of more tightly focused and just kind of let me go through the story missions of actually playing as both Spider-Man and just kind of putting in different kind of segment breaks. That would kind of work out better. So, let's go to the remastered one first. I really enjoyed this one. The biggest kind of strength is the world that is built and the story that is told. We are following Peter Parker as he has been operating as Spider-Man for 8 years now. So, the coolest kind of thing I think of that is a great strength to both of these is we get an older, experienced Spider-Man with Peter Parker, and then we get the high school one in Miles Morales, where he's dealing with high school stuff as Spider-Man. Those are two kind of really good stories to be able to tell across this kind of series, because then you get certain kind of aspects that are different for each one, because dealing with all the shit that goes on in high school is vastly different than trying to deal with being an adult as Spider-Man. It's different kind of working kind of things that you're going to have to deal with, and that's vastly well shown throughout both stories of this game. But let's hit the remastered one. We start off with Peter actually having working with someone on the Force, Watanabe, Yuri Watanabe, and he goes after Fisk and kind of takes him down. And it's like, oh shit, let's kind of see how this goes on. And that was a really nice kind of effective way to introduce us to this Spider-Man. So then we start going and we kind of see his world. We see him working with this feast center run by Martin Lee. And the thing is, I don't know much about Mr. Negative, even though that I'm now reading The Amazing Spider-Man. I kind of haven't really stuck with a run except for this one for how long that I have been, and I kind of understood Martin Lee and the whole kind of Mr. Negative introduction in the comics, but I have not read anything that really went into it that much. But it was nice to kind of see things going on and what kind of worked out, because there's this vast conspiracy and they kind of thread everything in, and that is the real strength here of seeing all these things kind of working together and Insomniac's take on Spider-Man's lore. And a lot of it works, except for when it gets into certain kind of stuff of just introducing stealth segments with Mary Jane and Miles. For some reason, I understand the idea of gameplay breakup and trying to kind of give a palate cleanser, because sometimes just superheroing can get a little bit tedious. However, if a game is not built for stealth, don't just do, hey, here's bare bones stealth, and just kind of deal with it. Because there's even good stealth in the superheroing of the Spider-Man. So it's just kind of like weird, like, alright. And one of my kind of criticisms, now granted, this might be because of me watching My Adventures with Superman, but I was kind of disappointed that they made Mary Jane part of the Daily Bugle and her as a reporter. Not that she's not smart, but I understand that they did it because they still wanted the Daily Bugle kind of being put into that kind of effect. But Peter has been working with Otto Octavius and trying to get his stuff off the ground. And I really like that and seeing a kind of mentor relationship as it starts to kind of deteriorate because Norman Osborn's a fucking asshole. And I do like that we didn't get Norman Osborn as the Green Goblin throughout this game right off the bat. He's still a fucking asshole because that's the whole kind of thing. Norman Osborn, even in his default kind of state, is a fucking asshole kind of dude that you kind of have to deal with. Goblin mode just fucking amps that kind of shit up. And we kind of see the ramifications of everything going on with that. But the thing is, with Mary Jane, sorry, I kind of getting more into the critiques that I've got to. My Adventures with Superman, I've been watching that and like, oh, she's kind of Lois Lane here. And I kind of like that she was either in the fashion or the acting industry because it gave her a different kind of world that we could kind of connect her with. Now, granted, I understand that they had her more as a reporter at the Daily Bugle, so that way it kind of works with trying to get into certain kind of places and help probably narratively. It just makes her a little bit more samey with Lois Lane that I would like. And granted, I have been watching something with Lois Lane friggin' in it, well, fucking in it, and it's like, so it could be a little bit of bleed through, so I don't hold it as a giant thing that like fucks it up. It's just a little bit disappointing to me. And then of course giving her the weirdest little stealth segments. I'm like, wah! But I do like that they were able to set up Miles Morales in this game to then have him with his DLC to make it make sense of him having spider powers and everything. So we see that Kingpin unleashed, him being put in the raft has unleashed a power vacuum, so Spidey's kind of going around dealing with Otto Octavius's kind of deteriorating state as he's trying to like get through all this kind of stuff in the grants and trying to make sure that his products work. Just having his hatred kind of fester and make him make even more rash decisions, partnering with AIM, Advanced Idea Mechanics, one of the worst kind of groups to kind of do that with. I also like that the Avengers do exist in here, and they have an Avengers Tower, and they're referenced, even though they don't show up. I love that. I like having a kind of world like that, where Spidey does talk about them and everything. But seeing Spidey trying to juggle all these things, so you go through swinging, controlling Spider-Man works very well. I would put this as one of the top kind of examples of how to do a superhero game right, of getting Spider-Man's movements, moveset completely down. Put this on par with the Arkham series of Batman. They get him, they know him. It only gets into the annoying kind of aspect when you bolt on the open world kind of stuff of like, okay, after a certain point, you're like, I've done this shit, and you pretty much have to grind it out because of having an upgrade system. Now, I understand that you're trying to get Spidey to not be complete poning everything right off the bat. However, I think bolting on open world stuff and RPG upgrading stuff has to be done selectively. Now granted, Insomniac does not do a horrendous job here. It just gets to a kind of repetitive tedium that gets settled in that I think does a disservice to the overall story and characters and the fun of actually playing as Spider-Man. Because when you are implementing RPG elements and experience and leveling up, you have to understand how long it takes. Now granted, when I was younger, I really wouldn't look at these certain kind of systems, though granted, as I was younger and still getting older, I was like, why the fuck is this grinding ass shit taking so long, and looking for other kind of things. It is not a horrendous thing to be able to get through a game in a reasonable amount of time without having to spend so much tedious kind of work. And yes, it's work to level yourself up to be able to unlock and have fun with the character. It's like, oh yeah, you want to do this? You gotta spend 300 fucking hours trying to grind and do this button pressing thing. It's like, no. Now granted, that does not happen here, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that that is an overall trend where they're like, we want you to spend as much time in this world as possible. It's like, the reason we spent that much time in certain kind of worlds was because we wanted to. And we had fun with it. And we were just fucking around. That's the whole fucking point of a game. At least for me. That is the point. I want to have fun and see what goes on and do everything that is fun to me. That's why Ghost of Tsushima did a really good job with its open world design of like, I can interact with whatever I kind of want to and get out of it what I want. So, Spidey is dealing with everything kind of going on. Martin Lee decides to then go and take on Norman Osborn, setting off this like terror attack that pretty much kills Miles' father and starts getting him integrated a little bit more into Pete's kind of circle. We see him and Mary Jane working together, taking on classic kind of villains like Tombstone before everything kind of reaches its crescendo towards the end and we get to the breakout of the raft. And it is the most organic bringing together of the Sinister Six I've seen. It kind of surprises me because I would almost see this and be like, this, what happens in the Marvel's Spider-Man game is the kind of level that I think Sony wants to happen for a Spider-Man movie, Sinister Six. Because the thing is, all these characters are already introduced and they're already in prison. And then we have Vulture popping out, Scorpion, Rhino, Mr. Negative, Doc Ock, and Shocker? Yes. Yes, Shocker's also in there as well. It's interesting to not have kind of the Green Goblin in that kind of mix. Let me see here. It was just so well done. I'm like, God damn. But we then learn also that they're working to try and get this Devil's Breath, which is a bioweapon that was created to be a cure, but nobody knows how to kind of like work, like to make it not kill people. Let's see here. Electro, Vulture, Rhino, Scorpion. Let me see. Lee, Electro, Vulture, Rhino, Scorpion, and Octavius. And then, of course, Otto, to get his revenge on Norman, unleashes the Devil's Breath, which is fucking kind of nutty because this was in around 2018 that this happened, and then it kind of, all the kind of world events that have occurred since then, it's just like, wow, that's kind of nutty that that kind of worked out, but it's done well enough. And then we see Peter trying to detail at the end of the game, taking on and beating all these different kind of villains and getting them back under control before he has his great challenge and fight with Otto, and it has emotional impact. And the thing is, he's able to defeat him. He creates a new suit and everything. Suits in this game are awesome. You get different kind of powers and abilities and suit mods that you have to work. That works with your playstyle. If you want to do one way, you can do one way. If you want to go another way, you can go another way. And they're all different. And they have a lot of ties to Marvel lore. But we see Pete go through and beat him, and we see Otto trying to say it was the arms and everything, and it's like, no, they were a factor, but you decided to use the neural interface. You had that inkling and you let it all go to this. And we see Pete then having to decide, does he do everything for the greater good, or does he try to save his aunt, because they only have enough to mass produce or cure one person. And we learned that Aunt May had already known his secret and everything, and it's really powerful and emotional as we see Pete. He's almost ready to do it, but he just cries as Aunt May dies. And it's really interesting to see how well executed that was versus how messy it was in No Way Home. And it's all down to execution. But it just sucked, and we see that everybody's, like, New York's getting back to normal, all that, and then we get like a tease about pretty much Venom in utilization with Harry Osborn, that he's got this sickness. Devil's Breath was pretty much utilized to do that. We see that most of the Martin Lee was going after Norman because his powers were introduced by trying to utilize Devil's Breath, and he got the Mr. Negative powers. That was a good kind of fight scene as we saw Pete Pete try to go over through that. Of course, his fucking over of Otto, and then of course them utilizing the rest of the Sinister Six to do their plans. Then we get into the DLC. The DLC really kind of sucks. And that's mainly because it exemplifies the best parts but amplifies the worst parts in like the repetitive nature of what you need to kind of do to kind of like grind through and get through. Black Cat is really well done. Love her character addition of what's kind of going on. Hammerhead is severely fucked over here. I thought we were going pretty much low-level street villain, which works out. But then he literally just becomes a cyborg with just his fucking head. It is the stupidest fucking thing possible, and he takes Silver Sable's shit and then just turns himself into Hammerhead with the robot body. It really confused me because it's almost like they needed to make this DLC and they weren't given the time that they were needed to make the story and the characters work out properly, because the base game handled the characters very well. There's nothing that I would put out. I mean, everything with the relationship, even the friction between Pete and MJ, of how they had broken up and how they're kind of back together and all that stuff that kind of that happens. And then we also get the effect that it links up to what kind of goes on in Miles Morales, because she needs to go off to Silver Sable's country, Symkaria. Symkaria? Symkaria. Alright, I got it right there. So. And then that leads us into Miles Morales, because as MJ had been looking into Norman Osborn's apartment during one of the stealth missions, a spider escaped, and then he gets bit, and at the end we see he's like, Pete, something's going on with my body. And he's like, shouldn't you talk to your mom about this? Yeah. And the voice acting is on point. The content delivery, Pete's Pete, Miles is Miles, Mary Jane is Mary Jane. They work very well. They get the characters. Like, content, everything just works off. And then, of course, we get Miles sticking to the ceiling, and then we get Pete being like, yeah, all right. So I love that they then have this kind of mentor-mentee relationship, which then gets us into Miles Morales as they're transporting Rhino to the raft, because Otto had a contract that he was going to do to upgrade the raft, and that's how he's able to get in and break everybody out. And the thing is, we see that something's kind of going wrong. Miles tries to go in, and the thing is, they kind of really go a little bit too hard on Miles in this, in my opinion. And the thing is the balance of a Spider-Man story. Kind of similar to what's been going on in the run. You have to balance out what goes on here, because Miles has Parker left throughout this whole fucking thing of like, anything that can go wrong does. He attempts to help write out the thing that's carrying Rhino, but then it goes to shit. He accidentally like lets them loose on these other raft people, and they're fighting and everything, and we see the Spider-Man trying to take down Rhino, and this is where Miles gets introduced to his Venom strike powers, his bioelectric discharge that he's able to do, and we then, of course, later also get him with his cloaking and all that, but we see that they have to deal with this. Pete's almost screwed up. We see this Roxxon dude's like, hey, I like you, new Spider-Man, but that doesn't last long because Roxxon's doing evil, stupid shit. And Pete's like, alright, I'm going with Mary Jane because the Bugle needs a photographer. And we see little seeds of things like this going on because Miles then talks to him and everything. And he's like, really don't want to be a scientist because the last time I did this kind of shit, I made a fucking monster in Otto. And Pete would feel responsible for that, even though he's not the one that strapped that shit to him. It's like, you kind of made it, but the dude's like, I'm gonna take this and do this shit. And he warned the dude to not fucking do that kind of shit. And he took care of that problem of stopping the dude with crazy ass shit. But then Miles was like, hey, why don't you become a teacher? He's like, I don't know, maybe. And of course, Pete has had his own kind of his own company in the comics. He has been a teacher. And honestly, Pete being a teacher is probably, in my opinion, like at least college level, maybe even just a high school science teacher. It just fits for him and how he kind of works as a person. Or like a really big philanthropic kind of thing. But him as a teacher, I just think fits, in my opinion, and I would like to kind of see that, especially seeing how he kind of does it in the game. And we see that Miles is trying to deal with protecting New York as Spider-Man, and seeing him have to deal mainly with Harlem and Roxxon doing shady shit with Newform. And his is the kind of thing that deals with the Tinker, with the Underground, as you go around. It has the same kind of stuff going on in the 2018 game, except you've got different kind of moves and different kind of powers. They do some kind of things to make it a little bit easier to track and understand which ones you've already done and grind certain kind of things. But again, it's not as bad as the other DLCs with how you need to kind of like do the same kind of stuff over and over again. It's better paced, the story's better, seeing Miles deal with having moved, dealing with the death of his father, dealing with his mother, going into politics and trying to help him make things better in Harlem, dealing with Genki and him being his kind of support and all the different kind of high school stuff, and reconnecting with his friend, learning out that his friend is the Tinker, and trying to stop her from fucking around with horrible fucking shit. So the Tinker kind of aspect is really kind of cool, seeing him try and stop her from doing this kind of stuff, even though he agrees with her endgame of trying to stop Roxxon. It is a really kind of powerful thing of like, listen, I disagree with your methods. I don't disagree with stopping Roxxon. And she just won't listen to him because her brother was killed by Roxxon because of how Newform is toxic and killing people, making them sick. And the dude's like, fuck it, I'm just going to do whatever I want. And seeing Miles having to try and deal with this and everything kind of going wrong and wrong and wrong, but still coming back up and doing this and trying to help out is really cool. Story's the best aspect of the game, and then mainly the gameplay aspect before you kind of get into the kind of repetitive kind of things that kind of happen. Let's see here. And of course, his mother does learn that he is Spider-Man towards the end. His uncle is the Prowler, fitting within the continuity. Let's see. And she just keeps going on and on. And Tinker just keeps putting herself into this kind of state of trying to take out Roxxon and not trusting Miles, because Miles didn't tell her he was Spider-Man until he pretty much had to do it to try and like stop her from doing this kind of shit, to try and gain her trust. But she's like, and we see that she attempts to pretty much overload and destroy the Roxxon building in Harlem, but of course Simon Krieger of Roxxon had changed the aspects and has been really pushed into a corner, and it's pretty much destroying Harlem. But Miles uses his powers to pretty much absorb the energy, and we've seen him doing this throughout the game because you do it in certain kind of bases to take down reactors. And then Finn, the Tinker, decides to blast him up into the sky, and it takes her out. Now, granted, we don't know if she's dead or alive, but we then also see more stuff of what's going on with Venom after the end credit scene. We see that Miles is protected by Harlem. Pete comes back and has a nice chat with Miles. I'm like, no. And we see Miles then go off, and Pete's just like, hey, listen, I'll train you now. We're going to keep up, but I'm not going to be swinging behind you anymore. You did your due. You watched over New York. Things might have gotten hairy, but you took care of everything. I mean, the city's still alive, so good. And it's cool to see him being like, yeah, I trust you, man. Do you do? And let's see here. Krieger's arrested because Aaron kind of flipped and turned himself in. We see Kirk Connors pretty much brought in as well, talking to Osborn about everything like that. What the fuck is that? I'll have to look at that later. But overall, I had fun with these games and really think that they got to the core of both Spider-Men, which is an important thing. They understand Peter Parker and they understand Miles Morales. Now, granted, most of what I read of Miles Morales has been in Ultimate Spider-Man, and I'd still need to collect other kind of stuff because I kind of stopped in the trades of it around the time that the ultimatum might have come into effect. So what I saw in here kind of lined up with what was going on in the Ultimate kind of universe kind of stuff, even though that's vastly different because Miles then came in after that Peter Parker died and crazy kind of stuff. But I liked seeing how they stayed true to the characters and did the riff on their own kind of lores adaptation-wise. I don't mind certain kind of changes as long as they work and they're congruent enough with the characters and the plot situations that we have on hand. And that we have, that there's a reason for certain changes, like Mary Jane working at the Daily Bugle. J. Jonah Jameson being an insane asshole, kind of like Alex Jones, just spouting off complete bullshit on podcast kind of shit. Yeah. Like, the strongest aspects, if you're into Spider-Man and Marvel kind of stuff, kind of like Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, there's a lot of kind of cool Easter eggs and shit in this, and it's actually just a fun superhero game to play. Superhero games to play. So I would definitely recommend it, and especially if you're like wanting something to test a PlayStation 5 if you want to. I mean, granted, that's the situation I just did, but yeah, like, if you get it at a good price, this was like $40 that I got it for, when it's normally like $69.99 or something like that. Granted, depending upon, that's kind of what it came out at. Sometimes you get sales on certain kind of stuff. I mean, this has been out for fucking ever. Same with console. But I would definitely actually recommend this game. There are annoyances and things that get tedious, but if you can find your playstyle and the suits that you want, you don't need to go that in-depth unless you want to be Spider-Man kicking all kinds of ass and doing everything. Now, the great thing about these two are that they have collectibles that do lore for the characters. I love that shit. Because we actually find things that are important to Peter and Miles, and then they narrate this stuff of what goes on, and then you can also look into like lore bits to see what goes on with this world of what are the histories of these characters. I love that value-added shit. And when you make it that it's organically integrated into stories and into gameplay, that's my fucking shit. My issue is when you make it tedious and weird and kind of just obtuse to where it's like, I need to read this shit, and if that's the case, I would rather read that shit and read it than play it. You know what I mean? Just, if that's how you're going to do it, just give me the thing to read. Yeah, but I really had fun with these. I can definitely understand people hyping up of what's kind of going on with Marvel Spider-Man 2. I'm interested to see how that's kind of going to go down. I probably won't. I've gotten weird with games, alright? The AAA industry has gotten fuckballs wild, and most of the time, a game comes out, and it's not even finished, and it's better to wait a year for it. I don't say that lightly. Like, sometimes there's serious fucking bugs with it, but this definitely turned me on to it, and I would definitely look into what's going on with Marvel's Spider-Man 2 when that comes out, especially with the introduction of Venom and the Black Spider-Man suit, and how Miles and Peter are going to have to deal with that situation, and I'm glad with that. I would definitely recommend this to anybody into superheroes, anyone specifically into Spider-Man, anyone into kind of action kind of game who's into the plot development and character development, everything going on with that. Like, if you're not into that stuff, that's cool. No problems there. This won't be a game for you, and that's quite alright. So, yeah. So, those are my opinions on the game. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also, like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.